Hey there, this is going to be a session recap for our Castles and Crusades campaign. This is session number 63. For this session, I had 5 regular players. We had Lork, the characters Lork, Sprawl, Renee, Cosmo, and Sprawl. I think I got them all. We picked up where we left off, which is something I guess we could talk about a little bit. Excuse me. When the campaign began, it was very much a West Marches style game because I have a bunch of players. We have a couple that are in the group that aren't able to make it to too many sessions. Schedules, adults, it's the death of all RPG campaigns. So I ran a West Marches campaign, and it was basically whoever could make it could make it. And this led to a much more consistent play style than we've ever had before with my home group, which has been good. Over the last, we're going on almost 3 years, we have kind of migrated back to a more traditional style campaign because I have these 5 players that are really very consistent. We may have one that may not make it to a session or so at a time, things happen. But overall, so we've kind of shifted the focus of the campaign back to that a little bit. I'm a big fan of West Marches campaigns. It really was a really great way to run for this group, but we have just sort of, a lot of other things have changed with this group too, as far as like we used to meet once a month. Now we meet twice a month starting this year. That's been great. And that's something I could talk about in depth too, but I don't want to drag the video out. But more frequent play you can get, the better. We just happened to fall into a once a month schedule decades ago, which was a mistake. I wish we hadn't, hindsight being 2020, but this has been great. We're 63 sessions into this campaign, 3 years into it. So it's been really good, very consistent, which is really important to a campaign that's going to last. Anyway, back to the session. So they started off where we left off in the last session. They're in the small village of Algan, which is on the north side of the Fingers Mountains, nestled in a bog, actually strategically placed. And Algan is very much inspired by a real Viking village named Trelleborg. And when I was developing Algan, I Googled Viking villages, and Trelleborg came up. I read about it, and it literally fit what I wanted perfectly, so I kind of just adopted it. So they've been made guests by a chieftain of the village, Ulfric Stormcrow. They're staying in his longhouse, having a small feast and some meal and some ale, and they learn about in more depth the 3 hunters that had gone missing, that are overdue. Barry and the party, with the exception of Cosmo, kind of want to get involved in this and help out. And Barry plans on using some magic to see if he can locate them. During the festivities, they swap tales. There's a small scene where Bothild, the female barbarian NPC that's traveling with them, she is arm wrestling with one of the villagers, and we ended up making this into a little thing with some simple dice mechanics, just d20 rolls. And Matt, my player Matt, was doing the rolling for and against, and I was doing the opposition. And Bothild ultimately ends up losing that, which there was some betting on her. I think Barry bet some gold on her, and but she ended up losing basically because of the dice rolls, but we left it up to chance. So it was fun. It was just added a little bit to the encounter, a little bit of role play. They end up that night or the next day, they go to where these hunters live, their longhouse. Barry gets some of their belongings, and he casts a scrying spell, and he's successful. And he sees through he's got a crystal ball. It's not magical, it's basically a glass ball, but he sees this clearing in the forest, and it has this kind of like a sigil on the ground made of like rock and stone and bone. And in it are these gibbets with 3 people hanging from them. So those are the three hunters. They can't tell if they're alive or dead, but that's where they're at. They are leaving that following day to go north. They need to make it to the God Peak Mountains and the Pass of 10,000 Steps. So they head out. There's some debate on, and the chieftain actually sends out another crew in the opposite direction because they're not sure where this clearing is. So he sends a crew out of searchers to look for them as well. There's some debate amongst the party about whether they should take time away from their quest to go look for these fallen hunters. Cosmo is pretty much in the opposition, and I think he was the only one that really, well, he stands out the most of the ones that were voting against it. Like, he just wants to get this done and move on. But they decide, like, if they do, come into an area, they will look for him if feasible. So Lork leads them north, and the pass north is still usable by wagon. So they take Barry's wagon with his crew, and at the time being, his apprentice Moira is also with them. They travel for quite a ways with Lork picking up the tracks of the hunters, and that leads eventually off west into the forest. And at this point, the wagon is sent back. Lork leads them into the forest. He, as we've described before, he's ranging up ahead of the party, and he comes to the clearing, and it's this. He notices a couple things. One, there's no sounds of like animal life or anything like that, which is unusual. And the clearing itself, there's like a low blanket of fog across it, but he can see that, and he has a much better view now than Barry did through his magic, a much clearer view that these three hunters are strung up, and they've been basically disemboweled, and talked about giving them like the Viking blood eagle and all that stuff. So they're dead, and the rest of the party catches up. They venture into the clearing. Barry is able to determine that this was some sort of necromancy that was done here. They flash back to like Tristana, the cultist and stuff, if it was similar to that, and not as much. Like, she was more into more into like summoning. She helped bring forth the butcher demon that they fought in the sewers of the city of Dornball. This was necromancy, some sort of ritual. I'm not familiar what it is, but he does know the type of magic. When they get closer, Barry and Lork get closer to the bodies. They can tell they've been, they're dead, and some horrific ritual was done here. But they notice, everybody else starts to notice, there's this figure on the far side of the clearing, and it wears like these tattered dark robes, has this horned antler around its head. They can't tell if it's like a adornment or coming out of its head. They're not sure. And it just raises up like this withered arm and points it at Lork. And now they're having flashbacks of their encounter with the Horned Lord in the ruined town of Dustthorn, the one that cast Finger of Death on Cosmo and killed him. So they're having flashbacks of that. So I know for sure my son who plays Lork thought for sure he was going to get hit with a spell. But that doesn't happen. What happens is they see all around them the dead rising. And basically it's Draugr come out and attack the party. And if you picture like the Draugr, if you ever played Skyrim, that's what my stuff is very much, these were very much inspired by. But they also have some like ranged ones, just like they do in Skyrim, that also attack. So they get into this fight. This fight actually wasn't very difficult for the party because Sprawl steps up and has a really good turning effect. With his, he's a cleric of Thruster, the dwarven brewing god, and they dispatch these Draugr fairly quickly. So that happens. They burn all the bodies. Let me back that up. At the end of the fight, they pull down the the dead hunters, and they make a funeral pyre for them, and they burn them, which is very common in this region. That's how they deal with it. They end up leaving this area because they didn't want to stay here. They push on a little bit, go back out to the road, and push on. They end up making camp. They have an uneventful camp. Nothing happens, and they push on, and they stay on the road. They realize that they still would have been able to use the wagon on the road, although there would have been some tough spots, but now they're on foot, well, mostly on foot. They have a few mounts. Lork has a mount, Sprawl has a mount, and Renee has a mount too. He has like a war pony that he rides, so they head off. Lork, the path hits like a rise, and he's ahead of the party again, up on this rise, and down below, probably a mile away on the road, he sees an encampment, and he's not quite sure, I don't think, at that point. Maybe he figured out what they were, but ultimately the party catches up, and they get a little bit closer. Or actually, I think I'm right about that distance. I don't think they actually move closer. Barry uses his ability with his owl familiar to fly down and see through the owl, and it is a hobgoblin encampment. And in the encampment, there's about 50 hobgoblins, with some of the Gorza, which are a cross between ogres and hill giants, that they fought before. But there's about 50 of them. So there's some debate here what to do, which is actually some of it was humorous, because Renee, who was rather low on wisdom, but is turning out to be a really great and fun character, in part because of that, because it's so well played by my friend Steve. He wants to go down and fight them all, and a bulk of the party's like, we need to go around this, we need to avoid this encounter. One, there's 50 of them plus the Gorza, so we're like, I don't know. So they end up ultimately deciding to head west back into the woods and try to circumvent around them. They're successful for a while until Lork, who's a little bit ahead of the party, not nearly as far as he usually is, because he's trying to keep an eye on them, and he doesn't want them to get lost. And he doesn't want to, when he was in the woods before, ahead, he was marking a trail so they could follow him. And he's not doing this now because he's trying to minimize the amount of trace that they leave behind. So Lork ends up catching wind basically of a hobgoblin scouting party, and he sees them. He actually conceals himself and waits for them to watch them, and they're kind of headed on an intercept path with the rest of the party. Doesn't seem like they know exactly that the party's there, but they're going to, because the party is incapable of being stealthy, aside from Cosmo, and Barry's pretty decent at it, but the dwarves will definitely give him away. So he uses concealment ability, and it was right out of describe it. My son probably didn't get the reference, but Rambo 2, when he's hiding in the jungle and stuff, and there's that one scene where he's in the mud wall and he laying just standing there, and a guy goes by him. But the older folks in our group, which is the rest of us, all got that reference. But he sees his party, and they're more lightly armored than the hobgoblins they fought before. They're wearing leathers, and Lork recognizes that they're very competent at what they're doing, and that has kind of been a theme with I've been trying to give to the party when they deal. This is only their second encounter with hobgoblins, but I wanted them to feel very different than the bugbears that they fought quite often, or I think maybe the few orcs that they fought, or the Ungren that they fought, which are like a beastman race. The orcs, hobgoblins to me are very much like the Uruk-hai in Lord of the Rings. They are better and more well-trained, and in there, even if you go into D&D, they're very militaristic. They use tactics, which they've demonstrated in the past when they fought the scouting party a couple sessions ago. They're better trained, and they're smarter. So Lork sees these and he debates on what to do, and I wasn't sure what he was going to do either. I for a moment I thought he was going to like maybe expose himself and try to lead them away from the party, which would have been really kind of cool and heroic. Scene would have reminded me, if you ever read the Sword of Shannara books, the first one, when the dwarf Hendel, who's very much like a ranger type character, leads the gnomes away from the party so the party can get past. That's a really cool scene. I always like that part of the book. Anyway, he ends up like throwing like a stick or something and cause a diversion, and the party diverts. Ultimately, the party ends up, the Hobgoblin scouting party moves on, and Lork catches up with them and the rest of the party and is like, hey. But it's kind of inevitable that the Hobgoblins find the tracks, or they hear the party, and they set up an ambush up ahead. And Lork and Cosmo have kind of developed this routine, is because Cosmo, obviously, because he's a halfling rogue, can be very silent. They move ahead, and they actually spot the ambush before the ambush spots them. And they set up in position like they normally do. It's an L-shaped ambush, again, showing that they actually use tactics. They're not like dumb orcs or goblins who would line up on a trail across from each other or something and fire back and forth. They know what they're doing, but they don't see Lork and Cosmo. The rest of the party kind of like sets off the ambush on purpose, which is thwarted at the beginning because the Lork and Cosmo are able to stay concealed by some great rolls. I think they were in 30, around a 30 on a stealth roll, I think it was. So they're able to light, Lork is able to help Cosmo light a flaming arrow, and he shoots it into the back of one of the ambushing hobgoblins. And the fight is on, and it's a pretty decent fight. This fight actually was pretty good because they had archers. They were all archers. So and hobgoblins aren't stupid, so they start using tactics, and they start laying into the party as the party comes into the ambush. And I was rolling randomly, like I had numbers assigned to each character, and I would roll randomly on a D4 for what they were, the way they were set up. And the archers would target whatever number came up, and by chance it kept coming up with on Barry, and Barry like took a bunch of arrow shots to the point where he started go like more defensive with his spell casting and cast like mirror image on himself, and which helped, but got quickly brought down because the arrows just kept finding him. I think even Renee got hit with an arrow, and he has a ridiculous armor class. He's very much a tank. Like he's very hard to hit. He doesn't do a lot of damage, but he can soak up a lot of hits. So I did get an arrow through on him. I think everybody other than Cosmo and Lork got hit. Cosmo and Lork were pretty much in, especially Lork, were engaged in melee, and Lork went after the leader, and but he wasn't able to dispatch the leader before he blew into a horn. And they heard like horns in response. So at first they didn't think, I think what happened was is he blew into the horn, and then it was I don't think the party thought, I mean, they obviously was concerning because they'd actually asked about horns before the ambush started. And I did tell them that one of them was carrying a horn. But I don't think they were overly concerned until the following round when they started to hear several other horns going off. So they knew that there was more scouts in the area, parties in the area. So they quickly, they end up finishing off the hobgoblins, and they flee. There was probably another debate on which way to go. Like there was a whole debate on whether they should fight the hobgoblins or not, and people were like, some were like, hey, we should not, and they don't know we're here, but and then some were like, well, it'll be 10 less because there was 10 in the ambush. They ended up fighting them, obviously, but they end up, after they defeat that scouting party, they flee further west into the woods, like a northwesterly direction, and they are pursued. And Barry at one point had turned invisible because his mirror images had gone down, and they were still shooting at him. So he had actually, after he turned invisible, cast fly. So he was flying above the bat. He wanted to get out of the fray because he took a lot of damage. They flee, and this goes on for many hours. It was just narratively done back and forth. I think I might have had them roll a Constitution check. Everybody passed if they did. Maybe I could be mistaken about that. I could be thinking of a different session, but if I am, the guys will let me know in the comments. They flee and they come into this valley, this forested valley, and they come across a sizable, decent sized stream, small river, and they're like, all right, we're going to the river and we're going to start trudging upward and don't come out the other side, so it'll be harder for them to follow us, which is true. So they're wading up this river. Eventually they lose their pursuers. Like Lork can tell that they're not being chased anymore, but they keep pushing on. And as they push on, on the right bank of the river, they come to this moss-covered statue, and out in the middle of nowhere. So they stop to investigate it. They scrape some moss off, and ultimately it's this finely carved statue just covered over with time, with the elements. But it's of an elven woman, which none of them have ever seen. The way I described it to them is that because some of the characters had met, from the B team, they'd met Orvon, who was a half-elf. And I just kind of described it as that you see like a vague, it kind of reminds you of Orvon, the character Orvon. And so they were able to surmise that it was an elf. And they've never met elves. Elves are very, very rare in this area of my setting for reasons. And they see some more stonework going up the bank of the river, up over like a set of stairs. So they follow that, and it leads them onto this arched pathway, and they keep moving and they keep moving, and ahead they see this ruin. And one of the things they notice about it is this overwhelming smell, not overwhelming, but this very powerful smell of lavender. But Sprawl had cast a spell, like I don't know what it's called, heightens his senses, and he picked listening. And one of the things he hears is the cry of like a wounded animal, like a deer. And Lork soon picks up on that as well, and they start following it, and it leads up to this ruin, and they're like, I don't see, there's no sign of this wounded deer. Then all of a sudden, like whipping through all the overgrown brush and trees in this big snake-like pattern, and coming up before them is this thing. And this is it was a, whoops, knock some miniatures over. It was this thing. So it was a forest Lenorm, which is a like a snake-like dragon. And this is a Reaper miniature that I painted up. I cut the wings off it because it was a original Bones White miniature, which was a horrible material. And they ended up just flopping over to the side. And I just almost threw the miniature in the trash, but then I chose not to. Just filled it up with some green stuff, and then finally got it painted a long time ago. Well, a long time ago, last year. But yeah, so this thing pops up in front of them, and the fight is on. Pretty good fight, especially in the fact that because Lork is probably the biggest, he is the biggest melee damage dealer, but this thing doesn't fall into his strengths. Like, it's not a humanoid. It's not a giant. So his damage dropped way off, like what he normally. So it was a tough fight. Claw bite attacks from it. People charge in. Lork, obviously. Renee, Bothild. Cosmo, definitely not. Sprawl and Barry stay back. But it's a tough fight. And at one point, it lets out this line of, like, acidic breath, and it hits Lork. Barry's able to dodge it. Lork fails. I think it was a dexterity save I made. I don't remember. But he fails his save. And what happens is then I tell him to roll a die. And I kind of screwed this up, but I had him roll a 6-sided die. And I had this in my mind. He came up with, I don't remember what number, it's not important, but his left arm all of a sudden just shrivels up and is like dead. And he drops his hand axe he carries in his offhand, and it's unusable. So what had happened was this spell, breath weapon has the same effect as like a wither type spell. And I should have rolled like a D4 because it could have been a random limb. And for some reason, I was just focused on his arms. I don't know why, but because it could have been his legs. But he can't use his left arm, so now he loses an attack. He doesn't have his offhand attack, and they're battling away. Barry steps up, casts a couple spells. I know one was this flaming dagger spell that he has that it ignores like spell resistance. He picked that up after fighting, I think, the Drow, which ignored several of his spells, much to Barry and probably Dave's chagrin. But he cast that, and he casts, I don't know, it was magic missile or something. He did some damage to it, and in turn, this thing is not stupid, and it like whips up. It moves really fast, like frighteningly fast, up and through the trees, and comes down literally right in front of Barry and just starts attacking him on its next turn, and drops Barry to -1 hit points. Barry goes down. They've been damaging it. They've been hitting it. That was one of the questions Steve asked, actually. He's like, are we actually hurting this thing? And they were. They were doing damage. We just had a lot of hit points. So Sprawl, he closes in with Barry. He's actually not, I don't believe he was actually that far from Barry. And he takes out the piece of the Rod of 7 Parts that he has, which has healing property. And uses it to heal Barry, to bring him back up, to stabilize him, because it'll bring him up to 0. And when he does that, I've been waiting for this to happen ever since they got the rod, that piece of the rod. I roll on a percentile dice, and it came up low enough where when that happens, all of a sudden, when he uses the rod, one of the spider demons comes in. And this was definitely a high point in the fight. I think it was for everybody, but it was also an oh crap moment for the players. This thing pops in. And because they know from the last time they fought them that it focuses on the rod user. And in that battle, which was Sprawl, it tried to bring him back into the portal that it had came through. So they're like, oh crap, we need to do this like handoff thing to get the thing away from the rod, away from the demon, and, try to prevent it from dragging anybody into this portal. And they're fairly successful. They are successful. It had cast Web, which entangled Sprawl because he failed his save, and they battle. They end up finishing off the Lorm. It was actually almost dead when that happened, but it was such a great moment. I've been waiting for, I don't know how many sessions where they've had that piece of the rod, and Sprawl uses it to heal. It's extra healing, which they always need. I've been waiting for this to happen, and it finally did. So it was a really fun moment, really tense moment in the combat, which was awesome. And they dropped the Lenorm. I can't quite recall who did that. I wish I could, but I don't. Yeah, I'm not sure who did that. Guys in the comments, they'll know. They remember that stuff better than me. Then they focus on the spider fiend, and they do bring that thing down pretty quickly. I don't. The battle with that wasn't much. The big thing with that battle with that thing was when it showed up. That really added a lot of tension to the fight, because they knew it wasn't just out to kill them. Like, it wants to take the piece of the rod and whoever has it back through that portal. But they end up finishing it off. They search the area once things come down. They bring Sprawl back up to... Sprawl brings Barry back to amongst the living. They search the ruin. They find a chest with some loot, some actually pretty decent loot. They get a few magic items out of it that they later above board identify. They got like a potion of climbing, boots of haste, basically, which Renee ended up taking, and a portable hole, which I rolled all these treasures randomly. A lot of my treasures rolled randomly. I do place items because, like Lork's sword and the Staff of Tamlin Roan, which Barry carries. Some of that stuff, which is a custom item. Some of that stuff I place, but I do a lot of random rolls too. But I know, like, Dave, who I've been gaming with for now decades, he has always wanted a portable hole in the game. I've never put one in the game, and I rolled it. So I was like, all right, yeah, I'll put it in. So they were pretty happy to get that. So it's basically a giant bag of hole of holding if you are not familiar. It's a pretty good item. So they won't have any trouble carrying stuff from now on, that's for sure. But they continue their search, and they find, oh, one of the things they found in the treasure was this stone tablet with elven script on it. And in Castles and Crusades, dwarves are like the linguists of the system, because they speak and read a ton of languages, and one of them is Elvish. So they're able to read it, and it talks about this elven maiden named Honoriel that basically, like, this land was elven land, and until the serpents came, meaning the dragons, it kind of reverts back to the Dragon Wars, which is very pivotal in my setting, especially in the timeline we're in now. And basically, she's attached to this serpent king, and as long as she remains, that she kind of keeps the serpent king from fully taking over the this land. They're not quite sure what that means, but they, in this overgrown garden of lavenders and stuff, they find a crypt, and in that crypt they find this elven maiden, and she's in some sort of stasis. Like, they can see that she's living and she's not cold to the touch, and they surmise that this must be an Oriel, and that somehow she's in some sort of stasis that keeps this thing at bay. So the Serpent King, whatever that is, at bay. So they start talking, like, what should we do? What should they do? You know, and one of the things that they came up with was like, well, maybe like her hairs could be used for the brush that they need to put together for to join the rod pieces, which was pretty cool. And they're going to continue on now that we ended the session there. They're going to continue on to the path of 10,000 steps to get to seek guidance from Nesna. But they, yeah, they definitely have that in mind. So we'll, it was a really good session. Again, all sorts of really great role play. The whole party, one of the amusing things the whole party has done, or pretty much the whole party has done, is because Renee is, Steve plays him with like a very French accent, which he does very well. And so whenever they're dealing with other NPCs and Renee's talking, the entire party acts like translators, like to his common, because he's speaking in common, just nobody understands him because of his accent. So like they do a lot of translating for him, and it's pretty funny. It really good. I thought it was a really good session. Everybody had a lot of fun, which is the most important thing, obviously. And we will be actually getting together again this coming Saturday, so it's a quick turnaround. So, and I don't have a lot of time because I'm going to be away for a little bit, so I got to finish prepping for that session probably today, because I won't have any more time after that. So yeah, again, thank you all for watching. Again, I appreciate everybody commenting on the videos. This one's going a little longer than I would like, but appreciate all the comments and messages sometimes I get, which is great. If you guys have any questions about like how I set up campaigns or sessions or miniature and terrain painting, stuff like that, I do have a painting page where I do on Facebook, because I do painting commissions. I'll even do terrain commissions. I haven't done any, but if somebody wanted something, if something I could do, I would definitely do it. But any questions like that stuff, I just like to see the comments and interact with people that take the time to follow the videos, which I really appreciate. But I'll catch you all at the next one. Thanks.